The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy as I silenced my cell phone. Hi, Shannon.
I should probably do that too. So,
I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're both technological geniuses.
We are such techno nerds, as Shannon once called herself.
Yes, because I meant that I like technology. It doesn't like me, but I like it.
I'm glad you like it. I got a new iPhone and I almost had a stroke trying to figure it out because the guy at the store where I bought it did not transfer anything. He said, "Oh no, I don't do that." And everybody told me that's totally wrong. They should have transferred everything. So I had to sit there and download every app, every program, everything that I ever had in my iPhone.
Oh, I would so go back and talk to his manager, which, is a terrible, terrible thing. But that is the cruelest thing I've ever heard, Nancy. That is inappropriate.
Well, luckily for me, I had a really bright 12-year-old help me.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. That's always helpful. Put the technology in the children's hands and they can explain it all to us. I used to make fun of my grandmother because I remember my grandmother came to visit once when my mother was in the hospital and she said, "I'm going to stay home today." My mother was doing better. She said, "I'm going to stay home and help out with the things around the house and I'm going to do the laundry." All the things you want to do for a family member when something like that happens. And I remember we came home and there was just a mess of wires all over the living room. And my dad said, "What did you do?" to my grandmother. And she said, "I was just trying to figure out how to turn the TV on." And she had unplugged everything. And my dad went over and he pushed the button on the TV and he said, "That's how you turn the TV on." But there were like 4 remotes, and I was like, "How did you not know how to turn the TV on?" And now I laugh at myself all the time. I have turned into my grandmother.
Me too.
It's terrible, 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 terrible. But anyway, we got a big show. Nancy, I was thinking about that. This is the last show that we're going to be doing before it's April, which is the big A month, right? Autism Awareness, Acceptance, and Action. And it's the last show before we start moving the first boxes into our new studio. So it's kind of a big deal, this last show. It doesn't mean we're going to be doing live shows from the studio next week because everybody has to give us a hot minute to get set up. But it's the last one when we're totally, totally doing things long distance. So we'll see what happens.
Very exciting.
And we've got a great guest today who's going to be joining us soon, an amazing dad. And a new author. So that's really wonderful. And we're excited. Alex Filstein is going to be joining us. So that's super fun. But first, I want to say that if you're watching the show, I do want to say that we are now taping these shows the night before. So it's not live, but it's premiering live. And generally, I am watching the show with you live, although I can't during this airing because I'm moving stuff into the studio. So I will take a look at all the comments that you guys send in later. And I don't know if you're available to be watching the show live, Nancy, but please feel free to use the chat. We do look at the comments that you guys send, and I will be answering them later on if you guys have any questions. We do love, 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 love the comments. This show does podcast, though. It is a free download wherever you get your podcasts, so we hope that you'll check it out. We love when you send in comments. We love when you give us reviews because that's what's kept us on the air for over 10 years. So thrilled. And Traven is showing you some of the different places that you can watch the show either live or in podcast form. So that's our disclaimer so far for today. And now it's time for our news stories. Our weekly
can we show some of Wyart's paintings first?
Oh my gosh, yes. Before the news, let's show some of Wyart's paintings because I love this part of the show.
Okay, here's 3 new ones. First, I'll show you one that he called Desert Sky.
I love that. The colors are gorgeous.
So that one's Desert Sky. I think Traven has it. There it is.
Amazing.
And then this next one is called African Zebras.
Oh, how lovely is that?
It's on some strange kind of canvasy type paper.
Huh. I like it. I like it a lot.
And then yesterday he painted his fourth cow.
The cows are to die for. Look at this one, you guys. This just kills me. It's the expression on that cow's face. Don't you just want to kiss it? It's just he's got a real talent for catching the expression in the eyes and in the face. There's movement and it's really remarkable, Nancy. It's just delightful. But that cow, you just want to give it a big old smack on the lips.
Yeah, it's a sweet cow. It's moveless, as somebody said.
Yes.
Moveless. Okay.
Oh, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. And so, Nancy, tell people where they can go to follow Wyart's art. And you're taking commissions right now. He's booking up, but where can people request a painting?
They can go to Wyart Autism on Facebook. And on Instagram, it is also Wyart_autism.
And that's on the screen right now for those of you that are watching the video podcast. And we should say that a lot of people have sent in pictures of their family pet and Wyart is now, and he's so good at it, you guys. He really captures the essence of the pet. But last week, Parker, during the live show, wanted to know if Wyart was capable of doing portraits of people. And I checked with you, and you said that he was doing his first one, but talk about how that turned out.
He did his first portrait of my best friend, Gina Windsor. And I think it really captured her.
I think so too.
Yeah, I'll show that. Maybe I'll grab that. Well, I don't know. I'll send it to Traven because it's already been shipped off to her.
Right.
But I will, maybe for our next week's show, we can take a look at that. And
fantastic. I just love this. I love, we got to see Wyart the other day. It's the first time I've seen Wyart in 2 years.
I know.
So it was great to see him, and I got to see him paint a little bit, and that was super fun and exciting as well. So, that's a surprise that we're going to hopefully debut later on in the month.
And it was great to see your son. It was great to see your son.
It was fun for us to all be in the same room. It's kind of weird. I mean, we've been in this kind of a room, but it was like, oh, I'm here with you. I don't know about everybody else, but I have a real hard time going, oh, you're live.
Yeah.
So crazy. Anyway, we should get to our news because eventually we're going to need to get to our guest.
Perfect.
So, I love it when April's just around the corner, Nancy, because it all starts to happen where every news outlet has to have their autism story. And some of them just put me in stitches. I don't know about you.
Well, this one was kind of like the heard around the world.
Right. So CNN, you got to love CNN. And I talked to Nancy about this last night. I said, boy, they're just really, really on it, aren't they? They've got a story out right now. The title for it, you can see there, heartbreaking delays in autism diagnosis and treatment got even worse during the pandemic. Well, thank you for being, right on top of that, CNN. It's so true. And I think it's a great headline because it highlights the fact that there were problems before with getting access to diagnosis and treatment and that it just got worse during the pandemic. It's just, where was this story 2 years ago?
Exactly.
Because that's the only thing. It's just like, well, thank you for sharing that now.
Right. And Shannon, this article is not just about the pandemic, but about the overall delays in getting a diagnosis and in getting effective ABA therapy. It does cover the really lamentable lag in getting services. So it goes on to some degree about that, how difficult it is to get a diagnosis and then how difficult it is to get quality ABA.
Yeah, it's a worthwhile read, especially if you're sitting there going, I just don't understand why this is. But I have to say that, a lot of the reason why is the same reason why we have problems with all kinds of things, because we're buried in the bureaucracy of paperwork. And well, let's legislate that we have to have 5 more things before you can do something. And only these people who are certified can do this.
Yeah,
And,
well,
and
Shannon, we're victims of that. After Wyart got approved by Regional Center for ABA, we waited for um, at least 8 months before we got card.
Yeah. Well, and that's when it was Regional Center, which is a state entity that had to loosen its purse funds. And we all thought that that was excruciating and that it was going to be so much better when insurance was in charge of that. And little did we know that insurance has perfected this game, this shell game of, oh, well, first you have to stand in this line to ask for this, and then you have to stand in this line. If I can just say to everyone out there, if you're having trouble getting a provider, that the first thing that you should do is call your insurance company and say, I need some help because I'm being denied. This is the phrase you use. I'm being denied access to care. Because if your insurance company is telling you, go, these are the 5 ABA providers locally that you have coverage with, and you go and their waiting list is 6 months or a year, go back to your insurance company and say, you've given me people that are full up. So that's a denial of access to care. I'm paying for insurance and you're denying me access to care. When you say that phrase, it should trigger a bunch of steps. And what they'll do is agree to pay for you to go to another ABA provider. So don't give up. You know what Nancy says? Nancy says, be a dog on a pork
Dog
chop.
at a pork chop.
Yeah. So you got to do that.
You have to do that with any bureaucracy, any agency. I'm fighting the VA right now for some benefits for my deceased husband, and I have to go down there in person. They don't take phone calls. It's just the way it is. I got to put my big girl panties on and just suck it up and do it.
Yeah. It's unbelievable what they put people through.
It really is.
But our next story is both thrilling and a heartbreak at the same time.
A nice story.
Yeah. If you guys, do you watch American Idol, Nancy?
I don't watch American Idol, but I did take the time to. I've watched it in the past, of course, but I did take the time to look at this clip.
Well, my family, Jim and I, not so much Jem, he's not so much into it, although he was when he was little. We watch American Idol. We really enjoy it. I don't really enjoy it until we get to Hollywood Week. But this year, each year I enjoy it more and more because, Katy Perry is wonderful. And I had said this on yesterday's show that Katy Perry believes in celebrating the difference in everyone. And she says, be yourself and let's all be weird because we're all weird. Mm-hmm. And I just love that. Let's promote that everywhere. So it's not this thing where they come in and they make fun of people anymore. I really, really appreciate this. But this young man, Sam Finelli, auditioned for American Idol and we just loved him. He's got a beautiful, beautiful singing voice. And he disclosed that he's on the autism spectrum. And we were really, really rooting for him. And, spoiler alert, if you watch this week's show, you know that he got cut in the first round of Hollywood Week. But I'm hoping that we can get him to come on the show and talk with us. I think he's got a career ahead of him. I think he's delightful.
He did the song Rainbow, which is really a great song about diversity and, not fitting in and the sometime heartbreak of that and the beauty of that. So you guys should look up, if you did not see the show, you can, if you go to this, you can get the clip by going to this article, which is in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And it has a link to his audition, singing Rainbow, and the judges really tearing up. He really moved them, didn't he, Shannon?
Yeah. He's delightful. He's absolutely delightful. And we really were rooting for him. I know that he is probably heartbroken that he didn't get through. But you know what I have seen time and time again on American Idol is that a lot of times somebody will come and the team says, you're just not ready. And it feels like a definitive no. And they always say to them, but come back. And I love that because over the years, American Idol just, I think they're celebrating their 20th anniversary this year. And what's fun is that people have come back. There have been people who, there's one gal this year that she auditioned in one city and it was on the fence, and one person said yes, the other two people said no. She went home, thought about it, saw that there was an audition in another city, and decided to go back this same year, and she got through to Hollywood this in the same year. Other people have come back subsequent years or years later and said, now I'm ready for it, and claimed their space and gone on to be top 10. So I hope we'll see Sam back. I hope that you only get to be up to a certain age, but I think he's young enough that he can come back several more times. So
I hope so too.
Fingers crossed for Sam, and we're going to reach out and see if we can get him to be on the show. Very fun.
This next article, for some reason, I skipped over it when I was looking at in the news stories, but I can tell you the gist of it, and you can get more into the detail. The article, which is in Live Science, Traven's putting it up there now, says that a brain structure called the amygdala grows too fast in babies who are diagnosed with autism by age 2. The study researchers found that this overgrowth occurs between 6 and 12 months of age before children are typically diagnosed with autism.
Yes, and I can't get my story to come up, so I don't know why that is. But this is a story that we keep telling here on the show, because every couple of years another study comes up that's about exactly this, and we just get a little bit further each time that we tell this story. But I remember when Jem was diagnosed with autism that they had the first beginnings of this, where they understood that the brains of individuals who are on the autism spectrum were bigger in general than people who were not on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And that they were trying to pare down, like, when does that happen? Like, at what age does that happen, and where in the brain does it start, and what does it mean? And I remember somebody early on telling me that because it's all part of this autoimmune discussion, right, that it seems like there is something that triggers the brain in very young children, and that the brain starts to grow faster than it can make certain connections, which means that there are some areas of the brain that are much more advanced at an earlier age than would normally be, which is why we sometimes see savants. But that sometimes there's a thing in the brain called pruning that happens, and when the brain grows too fast, the pruning doesn't happen the way it does in other brains, and you end up with a different, way of processing, which, right, that's really what we're talking about with autism. So what I love about this is that we're really honing in on where in the brain and when in the brain. And as always, when they do these research articles, they talk about the benefits supposedly will be earlier access, that right, if we can see at 6 months that a child's brain has been triggered and is starting to grow, that we can not necessarily stop that, because there are some benefits to it, but since we know that there will be potential deficits, that we could shore up the deficits and start right, making sure that we teach that child in a way that's appropriate for that child. It's mm-hmm, a very interesting way of looking at it, and I'm thrilled that we're getting further and further. It does seem like it takes forever, but where else do we have to go?
Right.
Right. And then our last story in the news today, I found this interesting because I think you have a better understanding of epidemiology than I do.
I don't know about that, Shannon.
No? Well, Spectrum News is talking about Lisa Croen this week in an article that they've done, and they've dubbed her autism's first dedicated epidemiologist. And I sort of thought this was interesting because, Kaiser Permanente, it's very interesting how things have gone with Kaiser. Kaiser has really been at the forefront of a lot of good innovation that has come to autism. Kaiser was one of the first big insurers that made the decision that they were going to cover autism, even when it was not required by the employer. Right. Now people might say, well, that was because people sued them, and they would not be wrong. that did happen, but ultimately they very quickly saw and said, we're going to change that. I do appreciate that Kaiser says, if we can find a way to make this better, then why wouldn't we?
Right.
And we all understand that they have a vested interest, because if they can find a way for people to lead happy, productive lives, it costs them less to do that than to provide support for people, or to take care of people who are sick because they weren't able to take care of themselves. So Kaiser has said, well, maybe we should look at this, and they have in their Northern California division of research in Oakland, have the first scientists to bring an epidemiology toolbox to autism research. So I think that this is really interesting, and I think we should applaud Kaiser for this innovation.
I do too. And she is really an incredible woman. She has focused almost entirely on autism research, a subject she finds incredibly fascinating and motivating. Every aspect of life that we encounter is concentrated in the study of autism. Everything from behavior, biology, physiology, and hardcore science to politics and ethics. So she's looking, really broad strokes at this. And she was inspired by her nephew, who is now an adult. And that is inspiring her to do more work in the area of adults with autism.
There you go. And so they're looking at a lot of different factors, but how the environment plays a role in what happens when someone is diagnosed with autism, including looking at things that are going on with the mother before pregnancy and during pregnancy. So I would love to get her on the show sometime and hear all the many things, all the questions she had.
Exactly.
I'm sure she's thinking about a whole bunch of things, and wouldn't it be fascinating to pick her brain and find out what questions she has?
Yes, it would.
But yay to Kaiser for making this happen.
Well, we'll have to reach out to her, Shannon, and get her on.
There you go. So we've got a guest who's going to be joining us in just a couple of minutes here, but I did want to take a second, Nancy, because Saturday is April 2nd, and that is World Autism Awareness Day. And I got to be honest, I get a little itchy and fatutzed around that day when people start saying, well, that's a blah, blah, blah holiday or whatever, or we don't celebrate it, or we don't celebrate it because it has to do with this organization. We don't have anything to do with that. I just want to say my 2 cents here, that World Autism Awareness Day was not started by any other organization than the United Nations. And it was started as a result of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Right.
And it was started as a way of making sure that there was initiative and movement towards making sure that people who are different, in all the different ways that people are different, had the same rights and opportunities as those that did not have something that labeled them different.
Right.
I just don't know how you could be against that. I understand, and I think the appropriate word is to commemorate World Autism Awareness Day.
Commemorate is a great word for it, Shannon.
Yeah. So that's what my family does. I encourage everyone to get behind that message. If there are certain organizations that you don't like and that you don't support, that is entirely your business. But unless you are protesting the United Nations, there's no reason to protest World Autism Awareness Day. Because that is in fact what it is about. So that's my 2 cents on that. Anything you want to say, Nancy?
Thank you, Shannon. No, I think we should look at it as a celebration, essentially, not look at it as something, as a negative thing.
Well, I also like that every year the UN, it's not just lip service. The UN says every year we're taking a topic and we're going to focus extra on that. And this year, the topic is inclusivity in education.
Which is great. How can anybody argue with that, right?
How could you be against that?
You can't.
And it is something that needs a fresh look. And so a lot of times if we have a show on the 2nd, I will read the whole statement by the secretary. I'm not going to do that today, and we don't have a show on the 2nd. not a live show anyway. Although we might do a live feed tomorrow from the studio. But in any case, I like to remind everybody what it actually is and what it isn't. So we don't have to be divided about it. In any case, I see that our guest has
We have a
joined us.
guest. Can I introduce him, Shannon?
Yes, I want you to.
Okay, this man is so accomplished. I'm just going to read his bio here. Alex Filstein. He's an award-winning inventor in Canada's energy sector, and his innovations focus on emission-reducing technologies to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions. How impressive is that?
Love
He
it.
is also the author of a newly published book. It's called Apollo Autism, and it focuses on autism acceptance and advancement towards a happier future in autism families. He's the administrator of a Facebook group called Autism Stories. He lives in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, with his wife, and he has 2 young sons who are on the autism spectrum. Welcome to the show, Alex.
You.
There he is.
Yeah.
Great to have you here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really
What an
appreciate it.
impressive bio you have.
Yeah, I was just talking about propane and butane up until 5 minutes ago. And no, for sure. And now I'm here, so I'm really excited to be with you.
Well, we're really glad to have you. Alex, we'd like to start with your personal journey, having 2 young sons on the spectrum, what that is like, that experience is like for you, and the fact that you were diagnosed with autism as an adult.
Yeah, for sure. My son was diagnosed in 2014, and it was quite a journey. Like other parents, I didn't really know what was going on. He was nonverbal back then, extremely steamy boy, having like pica, so eating just random objects, right? Like going through that entire journey. Even today, he still has like a toy. He calls it a mantis shrimp. He's like, it's like made out of pipe cleaners, and he kind of walks with it everywhere and kind of steams with it. And so I went through this journey, which took a lot of kind of acceptance, growth, and development on my part. And we all know how autism dads, they don't really talk about this. Autism moms, they have those big communities. So, and then 4 years later, I went through it once again because my second son was diagnosed on the spectrum as well. At which point we received the diagnosis. I personally received it in a way kind of like, oh, okay, want to go for dinner? Want to go to a restaurant? And it was super easy. And so I was thinking, what can I do in the community to make it more for the new autism dads, a little bit more like my second time versus my first time. And I started volunteering, doing autism dad Zooms, and it kind of got me to think about the macro picture. How can I make more impact? And that's why I wrote this book called Apollo Autism.
And I really want to talk about Apollo Autism and about what, break it down for us. Because I understand you're somebody who is very interested in space. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm interested in space, and part of my thing, like, by the way, I was also diagnosed on the spectrum after my kids were diagnosed. So, which explains why I know everything about the Apollo lunar landing program. I knew everything like about the dates. I would just read the patents for technology advancement that took place. Everything from microwaving to diapers in space. I never knew why I like patents. I have 13 patents myself, working for a super major oil producer, cutting emissions. I have millions of pounds over cutting CO2 emissions in reality, which kind of resulted in that obsession, being able to really execute on my ideas, what I have in mind. And it kind of brought things to somewhat of a closure for me personally, because when I was little, I would just sit and like just read. I would just observe kids, and it never was a topic because my parents, they're Ashkenaz Jews, like from East Europe, right? I grew up in Israel. I've been in Canada for over 20 years now, and it never was a thing. We never knew why I was this way, and no, we never talked about this. And only when my kids were diagnosed, we started looking into my past, and I was like, really, I didn't really play with any kids when when I was little. That's different. Um, so that's kind of my personal growth. But about the book, yeah. The book focuses on an engineer that lives through the Apollo program in between 1967 and 1972, and he has a similar journey to mine, having two kids on the spectrum. And most of us know about the Apollo program. We know about Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, but we don't know the journey the Apollo program had to go through in iterative way to overcome significant challenges and go phase by phase until they reach their goal. And so this engineer is working in the Apollo program, and this is an historic fiction based on real events. And he kind of learns to overcome his challenges having autistic kids as the program progresses, and he kind of comes to a conclusion of acceptance. But I'm not going to ruin the book.
No.
But in overall, it's mainly about maybe accelerating acceptance for moms and dads, and show them some of the historic past of how it used to be back then. And how it used to be is that everybody, like, the blame was on the mothers. Can you imagine, you go today, your kid gets diagnosed with autism, and you're like, you know what, actually, sorry, but it's kind of your fault. You're just too cold to your child. That started with Dr. Leo Connor back in 1943, advanced further in 1959 through Joey the Mechanical Boy with Dr. Bruno Bettelheim. And so even in the 60s, as the humanity were going to the moon, landing on the moon, autistic kids were looked at as it's the parents' fault, and you guys are kind of strange. And acceptance in school was not a thing. Diversity and inclusion was like, if you're diverse, you're just like, we don't accept you. So I write a lot about this in the book in the hope that the parents of today can also see what it used to be back then.
Yeah, I mean, just what a tragedy that so many mothers, went to their graves feeling like they were to blame. They were called refrigerator mothers. It was just absolutely unbelievable, right?
And it's not like a year or two. We're talking decades of those
Right.
type of realities. And then who would question that? Because it's like, well, 10 years ago it used to be that way, 20 years. So what changes now, right?
Yeah.
And yet I feel like, as you were saying, that we don't hear from the dads very much. We hear from the moms. I feel like the moms compensated by creating a tribe, and the moms all talk to each other. And a lot of times I feel like now the dads are just left out, left off the table, pushed to the sidelines. I mean, I've been saying all week, Alex, that we were so thrilled to have you on. And I always say, because I love to hear from the dads. It's amazing and a little still rare for us to hear from a dad. And you think that the dads, and I think Nancy does too, the dads have a particular important part of this. Talk to us about what role you think the dads need to take.
Yeah, so first of all, as I was investigating what was taking place historically, we know about, like, the first case for autism from Leo Connors. It was Donald Triplett, right? Donald Triplett. And what I read, what's really fascinating to me, is that I read about in Leo Connors' investigation how he looked at the parents as well. And I could see a little bit of myself in that father. I think Donald Triplett's father was autistic.
Wow.
And I think many autism parents today, they could be also on the spectrum. I mean, think about this. In California right now, 1 in 26 kids is on the spectrum in every classroom. But if you look further into the data, is 1 in 16 boys. It's not like 1 in 44. It's not 2.3%. It's 4% of the population in California. But then you have 2 kids in every classroom that are boys on the autistic spectrum. And so I think, first of all, that the autism is not rare. I think it's time for autism dads to get kind of more educated on this topic and come to the communities, just like closer to what I'm trying to create, and talk about this openly, and know that you're not alone, that this is not a journey that is still stigmatized. that there's an element of acceptance here, and it comes through community. And I see moms are doing an amazing job in this area, learning from each other, kind of creating those friendships. And I think there's a lot of rooms for dads here to also kind of inherit some of those vibes and know that they're not alone. And so that's kind of how I think about dads. I mean, I talk openly about my diagnosis, about my children at work. There were many people that came from the company like, hey, Alex, me too, me too. You know, there's this kind of me too kind of, and we talk about things and we learn different strategy and how you um, cope with things, cope with the stigma, cope with the kind of develop more acceptance, you know. And just final thoughts on this. I think like autistic children, they don't really require perfect parents, but these children need accepting and happy parents who will support and love them. And so that's kind of um, where I'm at on this topic.
I love it.
Alex, is your Facebook group Autism Stories about giving support to others?
Well, initially, I started this group because we were doing dads, autism dad Zooms, getting the dads on the Zooms, and I figured, well, we'll just start a group, you know, because I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, okay, a group, a page, I don't know, just launch something, and then it kind of grew, and obviously, there's all kind of people, autism moms and family members and some greasy people that trying to promote like that's kind of how it started. But I think I'm a solutions guy, so I would execute something in the field, cut emissions. You tell me, hey, we need to reduce emissions, global warming, climate change, we need a solution to do this. So I'll go to an oil field and I'll propose a solution and we'll cut emissions. I'm just very literal that way. And so when I saw like that, what I went through with my first son in his diagnosis, I'm like, well, this is not. There's a gap here between how I responded to this event because I discovered the world, but there's this community out there that know, like you, right, Nancy, Shannon, you're the community. You know everything about this. So if I had access to you, you would just accelerate this journey for me for being able to relate to kind of what you went through and learn some of the ways maybe and even today in the data we have from people, for example, in Utah they took 8-year-olds, and 8-year-olds they looked at IQ, intellectual disability, and about I think it was like 27% of the autistic kids had intellectual disability. They did the same with the 4-year-olds, and about 60% had intellectual disability. So what we have today is that we have parents that are hearing from the community saying, well, your son has intellectual disability, but about 30% of those kids will not have this intellectual disability in like 4 years later. So we have this big gap in communication and the way we measure things, in the data we receive. So I think there's this huge importance about being part of a community and really understanding that what you're told is not like exactly how, because ADDM network, CDC, they're also trying to learn about what's happening here, right?
Right. So,
Amazing.
Alex, based on your experience being on the spectrum yourself and having 2 sons on the spectrum, what advice would you give to parents then of newly diagnosed kids?
Yeah, and I talk a lot about this in my book. I think if you were, let's say, in grade 5, and I give you a PhD degree, and I say, hey, go teach university. I mean, that's just like, that's a huge macro event, right? And you're not able to do it because you didn't go through this process of graduating high school, going doing bachelor's degree, getting your master's, PhD, and now you can teach. I feel like sometimes, like in the autism diagnosis, we were told kind of like, well, just continue to love him. It's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Good luck, And this is a big macro event that takes place. And I feel like the advice I would give parents is that don't look at it this way. Look at it as an iterative process as you phase into the future that takes time, and you will find happiness and acceptance. You will find it. It's just don't look at it as a one big event, like it just happens to you, which is what usually happens. And in the book, I really describe it as phase by phase process where this character is going through and he learns, right? Because I'll give you an example. Apollo 1, January 1967, the entire crew vanished in Florida on the pad. Roger Chaffee, Ed White, Gus Grissom. There was a fire on the pad. 1969, July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin landing on the moon. Something happened over those 2 years, and I'm not comparing autism by any means to any of those incidents. There was an iterative process to say, okay, let's improve, let's try this. Okay, this didn't work. Let's go to the next stage. And you iterate as you go. And that's kind of how I saw my life because I'm so obsessed with that program. That's kind of how I saw my son development. That's how I looked at my second son, just very patiently iterating phase by phase, advancing forward. And I think this really helped me to be in a position where I'm somewhat of a leader in the community now. I openly talk about this. I go to dads, people that still kind of afraid of this topic, and I talk to them about it. And somehow it makes sense to me where you break it to smaller pieces. It makes sense. And of course, not being judgmental, not saying, "Oh, do this is wrong, this is right," just more of a kind of supporting element. I think the moms are doing an amazing job in this area because you guys are naturally patient and kind of warm. I don't know how to explain it, but the dads they're a little bit, there's a little bit of that kind of old school mentality, kind of, oh, I'm gonna fix it. Things are, we will
Yeah.
get over it.
A
I'm in
lot,
control.
a lot of dads. I mean, I think of Rodney Peete, Holly Robinson Pete's husband, who wrote a book called "Not My Boy." A lot of dads in the beginning, and I know my own husband was in denial in the beginning and had a really hard time with the diagnosis. It's like they think, well, I'm not going to have the baseball player, the football player, the scholar. This is not going to happen for me now. It's the end of a dream. So it is, I think, tough for many, many fathers.
It's true, and but reality is that I'm also not going to be a baseball player. I'm
Right.
not going to be landing on the moon anytime soon.
Are you
Uh,
sure?
yeah, I'm
Are you
sure.
sure?
I'm sure. So maybe that expectation of, I don't end up at point A, but I will end up in this point B, and being a little bit more flexible, agile, just kind of iterating phase by phase over time, not being like rigid on anything. It requires a lot of kind of fluid flexibility on the parent's part and just kind of supporting your child. I also very passionate about the divorce rate in the community. I don't know exactly what it is, but at the time where your child needs the most support, parents, there's this element of, well, maybe it's from your side, maybe it's from your grandmother's uncles, like this is so unproductive and nobody really needs those conversations. But I just know that that's how it is in the community, and we can do better by having the conversations like this. And you know what, like, more flexibility, more agility. It's not a simple topic, but if we break it to smaller pieces, we can overcome the challenges as we advance.
I love this example that you're setting for people over the world, especially for dads, Alex. I'm sure that people are going to ask, though, you're so capable. You're clearly brilliant, and you're clearly an amazing dad. And yet, since your children were diagnosed, you got a diagnosis, and so forgive me, but I think people are wondering, like, what are the challenges that led you, and if it's too personal, please feel free to say I don't want to answer, but I think it would be helpful for us to know what are the kinds of things that led you to realize, oh, maybe I don't, because maybe you think differently, but to go and get a diagnosis of a disorder, what made you think I might qualify for that?
Well, first of all, like, I always was told that my thinking, I use a lot of analogies, a lot of examples, like lots of metaphors. Like every time I would talk, I would just use a lot of kind of third party things. What really made me want to go and get the diagnosis, or at least look into it, is really my wife, because I really wanted to show her that I can be more supportive, more in place, because I tickle on a lot of things. Like I will be very obsessed about my work and just really dedicate to that. And so she could be like waiting for me, and I'm thinking about other things, right? I could be looking at like some ticker, and then looking at some data for hours, reading like Apollo patent. So I know it's just something. It's a big part of me, but I had to, like, I don't want to get divorced. I want my kids to have a family. I love my wife. She loves me. So I wanted to have disclosure. And the more I educated myself on this topic, the more I'm like, wait a second. There's no way I'm neurotypical. There's no way. I even did like a Google test on like, and I'm like way to the right, you know.
Yeah.
So I just went and met with a psychologist that specializes in ASD diagnosis, and she was like, "Whoa, what took you so long?" Like, so that was a surreal event. But I really wanted to bring my wife and be like, "Hey, see, like that's why I go to the community and I talk about autism all the time, and that's why I look at this data because." I just don't know how not to, like, because I see an opportunity here to share this knowledge, where typically I think people will be like, okay, sounds good. I'll just, go watch a baseball game or something. So
Well, I love it. I love that you have this persistence that it can be better and that you're working on it. I always say, don't I, Nancy? I say, well, hopefully brighter minds than mine are working on it. Alex, I think you're an infinitely brighter mind, and
thank you. You're too kind. You're too kind.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're working on it.
Yes.
How are you? I'm sorry, Nancy. How are your boys doing now?
Yeah. So my sons, they're 7 and 11, just like the store. Seven and
Mm.
see. No,
I like it.
they're doing well. And and again, if I had certain expectations of how they would do, I could have been in a different place, me personally. But I'm just really glad that we're making this progress. I'm part of this on this journey with them, right? And I accept of who they are, accept of who I am. I understand. I'm educated on this topic. I know that autism didn't just happen like last year or 2 years ago, or we see like high prevalence rates because all of a sudden, like, things were evolving over time. Things are happening, right? And so I'm mindful of that. I'm mindful of my journey with my sons, and we're continuing on this journey. And that's kind of what I write about in the book, because it is a journey. And you start in a certain place, you have triumphs, you have defeats, but for example, when my son was 5 years old, he just used to go to playground, eat bunch of rocks. So he would just put those rocks in his mouth. Then I'll go to my wife and be like, how many you think he ate? How many? Like, I would have those conversations, and she's like, dude, like, what are you talking about? We need to go to the hospital, right? But now
Wow.
he doesn't do that anymore, and so that's a win, and I will take that win.
Yeah.
And if he's a little bit delayed on his school, or maybe 3-4 grades behind, it's okay, because there's next year and there's this year. So keeping that kind of flexible mind and open-minded about progress over time, which is really important.
Well, Alex, you are so enlightened. And I think both mothers and fathers can benefit from your knowledge and what you've shared with us today. It's
Thank
my
you.
hope that during this hour, we've had some fathers listening, and maybe you've helped to change some of their perceptions of their own journeys.
Thank you, Nancy.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Where can we get the book, Alex? That's the next question.
Well, I'm publishing for Autism Month because like I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I just spent like 2 years writing this book, and now I need to like market, and I'm not very good at marketing. But I think there's a lot of value for parents. By the way, I'm donating all net proceeds to Ukrainian children. It's
Mm,
heartbreaking what's happening. From the sales I already raised $600 that were
Nice.
donated right away. I intend to do so this year as well. So it's on Amazon. It's there. I'm very proud of this book. I think it's an important one. I think it provides a story of autism in the late 1960s. It's a dad that has no idea what's landing on him, and he is trying to basically land in a better spot. And it's an inspiring story. It was really important for me to tell this story. And I think it will inspire many people. So it's on Amazon. It's called Apollo Autism. So the Apollo journey and the autism journey that just happened to interconnect phase by phase, just like I'm trying to do in my life right now.
There it is, Apollo Autism. And I have to ask, I mean, obviously, have you been able to go to NASA? Have you been on the tour? Have you seen a launch? Like, how into this are you?
A lot. I'm really, I'm really into it. Um, I'm more obsessed with the patents. I learned so much to the point that I can understand why the inventor did the patent. It's really strange to share with you, but I can see if the inventor did it to keep his job even, because I
Ooh,
can relate the dates to kind of like, well, is he just trying to add value, or this is like a legit technology that's going to be advanced? So I think I kind of see those perspectives in a little bit different light, but and I don't really, I'm not like a rocket science guy in a way, even though I have a degree in geomatics engineering. I just like the element of learning from that iterative process where you develop something and it ends up working,
yeah.
so, and that's what really worked with me and my children, because I can tell you, like, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be happy and in a good place, and my children will benefit from it.
There you go. I am a big fan of the Apollo program, but I don't know nearly as much as you do. But it was a very big deal to me a couple of years ago. I got to go down to Houston, and my son and I got to tour the international, where they have the International Space Station, the control room and everything. And then we just like turned a corner and they walked us into the room where the control room from the Apollo missions, and there you are, you're there and in the room where that all happened, and I just started to cry, Alex. I just had this emotional response because my dad was really into the Apollo programs. It was so unexpected, but I just stood there and cried for the opportunity to be there. There was like a coffee stain on the carpet, and I kept thinking, who spilled that coffee that has been there for all of these years? And it was just a big. And then as a result of that, a couple of years later, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Temple Grandin.
Of course,
We
yeah.
we took her to back there. They gave her a tour. We got to go with her for the entire day with 5 astronauts, and she got a tour from 5 astronauts while we filmed. At some point we have to put out a mini documentary about that.
Well,
But
I wish I was there. Yeah.
right? Well, if I ever get the film out, then you can feel like you were there for the day. But I thought that I was going to come out of my skin because I wanted someone to commemorate that it was just this amazing day of being a geek about the space program. And I'll tell you what else was amazing was they asked if Temple would speak during the lunch hour to all the employees of NASA. And she said, I would love to do that. How many seats are in the space where you're going to put me? And they said, oh, we're just going to put you in the small room where there's like 100 chairs. And she said, that won't work. You better get a bigger space. And they were like, well, it's lunchtime and people don't really, come to all the speaker series. And she said, get the bigger room. And they have on the complex a big theater. And they said, all right, but we wanted to fill up for you. There was standing room only because so many of the employees, as you were saying, they were like, I have a grandchild, or I have 3 kids, or I think it was news to NASA how many people were working for them or have family members or believe that they themselves are on the spectrum. It was kind of an amazing moment to see.
Well, and statistically, I think we're just like in the first innings of what's on that autism journey, because how many neurodiverse people working right now at NASA? Out of the 400,000 people that work in the for the Apollo program, those were not like just typical neurotypical brains, right? There was a lot of diversity in there, and so I really wanted to capture the story of that engineer. It was so important to me to show his life and what happens to him on his journey and the triumphs. And we all know Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
Houston. We have right, and so
Yeah.
I'm kind of integrating all of those events, and he's basically, and how did they basically came up with solutions to proceed despite the challenges. And I think it's not really, for me, it's the technical element. It's about that human spirit, our ability to overcome challenges and really converge to a place where we achieve our goals and become happier.
Amazing. Well, Alex, thank you so much. Traven, let's
Thank
once
you.
again show them where they can get the book. And if people want to follow the group that you have on Facebook, where do they need to go for that, Alex?
Well, I have a very open profile on Facebook. It just, you can add me as a friend or follow me, or Autism Stories on Facebook.
Okay.
And that's about it. I'm a simple guy. Yeah.
Wonderful. And there is the book again, Apollo Autism. Make sure that you check that out. Alex, you're an inspiration to all of us. Thank you so
You,
much for being with us.
you definitely are, Alex. This has been a wonderful conversation. We're so glad you could join us today on the show.
And I really appreciate you. I watch you, Nancy. I watch you, Shannon. Thank you so much for being advocates and leaders in this community. And you deserve a lot of credit for pioneering this for us. And so
Likewise.
now we're joining you as well and trying to do our best to build a better future for our community. So thank you for this
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Have a
Good day.
great day.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. What an amazing,
He
amazing
was
gentleman.
phenomenal. I hope some fathers were listening, don't you, Shannon? And
I
every
do.
moms, fathers, kids, anybody.
Yeah, amazing. I love his whole viewpoint, and hope that that's what spreads wildfire throughout this community in the wonderful month of April and every day. We are just about out of time here, but want to thank our guest for being with us. Want to thank all of you for being with us. You'll want to stay tuned because we are going to have some special programming tomorrow, and I believe that we're going to have a marathon that's going to run on Saturday. I got to ask Traven about that. I don't know that we've finalized that, but we are going to be back on Monday. And Nancy, it goes completely off the hook next week, so I'm so excited. We have a mystery guest for you on Monday, but on Tuesday,
I can't wait.
oh yeah, it's going to be good. Then on Tuesday, Dr. Doreen Grampuchet does Ask Dr. Doreen. Then on Wednesday, I have a wonderful hour-long interview with Holly Robinson Pete, which I'm so excited about, talking with her about everything that's been going on and everything that's going on and the exciting new things that she's doing with the Hallmark Channel and what that might mean for the autism community. And then on Thursday, Nancy and I are welcoming Matt Asner and Nava Paskowitz Asner to talk about their journey and the things that they have going on over at the Ed Asner Family Center. It's going to be a great kickoff week for the first week in April. I'm excited about it, Nancy.
Fantastic. Great guest.
Yes. All right. So, and don't forget that on April 18th, Temple Grandin is going to be joining us live on April 18th. If you have questions you want to ask Temple, there's no time too early to send to us. So I know it's always, everybody always wants to ask the questions live. Temple always tells me she would prefer to have the questions beforehand. Then occasionally she does answer a live question when she sees it in the crawl, in the questions in the chat, but she always says she prefers to get the questions beforehand, you guys. So if you want to make sure your question gets asked, send me your question. You can send it in on the chat on Autism Live, or you can send it to me at shannon@autism-live.com. That's another way to do that. Anything else, Nancy? Anything else that we left off the table here?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all today, Shannon.
That and Wyart's art, which is just amazing. Make sure that you're checking out Wyart.
I sent Traven the portrait of my best friend. I just emailed it to him, so maybe we can have that on next week's show.
We will definitely have that on next week's show. All right, my friend. We'll see you next week, but until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And yourselves a hug from me. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.